Today we're going to be talking about how to remove and replace the front disc brake pads on a 2015 Hyundai Santa Fe Sport 2.0T. This particular Santa Fe has a little over 100,000 miles on it, and today I was going to jack it up and rotate the tires and check the brakes while I had it up. It's never had anything done to the brakes, but I did notice after I raised up the vehicle that right in here, if you look in here where I've scratched on this pad, the brake pads are worn a little more than half on the inside pad, and the outside pad, which we really can't get in there to see very well, is actually worn almost to the metal on the backing of the pad. So today I'm going to replace these front pads, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. If you have never replaced any brakes, pads, or drum brakes on a vehicle, I would recommend only doing one side at a time, just basically because if you forget to do or how to put any of this back together, you have one on the other side that you can use as a template to show you where everything will line back up. And also the piston in here, which we have to compress back into the housing, will pop out on the other side if you press this side in and the other side is not connected to the vehicle. So just do them one wheel at a time. So now I'm going to reach in here with a flat blade screwdriver, and I'm going to pry on the caliper itself against the rotor gently. And as I'm doing this, the piston is actually pushing back up inside of the housing. And you don't have to go very far with this, just enough to get this caliper loose, and you can actually rock it with your hand at this time, and you can see that it's loose. So now the next step is I'm going to take a wrench and I'm going to take these two bolts loose right here, one on the top and one on the bottom, and at that time this caliper will slip right off of this bracket here. In order to get these bolts loose, you need you a 14mm wrench. Just put it on the bolt itself, take your hand and just tap down, loosen it up counterclockwise, and when you get that one loosened up, come over here on the bottom one, hit it down, loosen it up, and then you should be able to take your hand and go in here and remove these bolts. There's one there. You can actually see the caliper itself rocking back in two. I'm trying to do this one-handed. And there are your bolts that hold your caliper on. Now you can reach in here, grab the caliper itself and lift it up. And I like to rotate it around, upside down, just like that. Here's your piston assembly. And in just a minute, we're going to push this piston all the way back into this housing. And here are our disc brake pads. This is our outer pad that's actually worn a little more than the inside pad. And to get these off, you just need to get you a screwdriver, come in here and pry on them a little bit. Let me back away a little bit. And you see it comes out. That one's on the floor. This inside one, just pry it out. It's on the floor, and now we're ready to get our new pads ready to put on the vehicle. Inside of the new pad kit, we do have a couple of pieces of hardware here, and if you'll notice right here, there's actually this thin piece of metal. It actually holds the ends of the pads in position, and I'm going to go ahead and take my screwdriver, come in here and just gently pry up on these little tabs right here, lift them up, And we're going to take these old ones out. We're going to take the new ones, slide them back in here, and you'll see they fit right in there. And so we're going to just take our finger. If you can't do it with your finger, you can get a screwdriver or anything and just push down until you get this tab locked in. And there's one on the top right here and one on the bottom. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Here's what these tabs will look like after you get them onto the bracket. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on pushing this caliper back in, this piston back into this housing. In order to compress the piston back into the housing, you can use a disc brake caliper tool, or you can use a big pair of channel lock pliers. Just be very careful when using pliers because you don't want to break your piston while you're trying to push it back. So now I'm going to grab this piece of metal right here and this part of the tool, and I want to come back over to the vehicle, and I'm going to set this tool up in here and show you how we're going to push this piston back into the housing. This is the way it will be set up. You have the compression piece right here. This actually right on the edge of the piston, and this piece is actually pressing up against the back of the caliper housing. So I'm going to take a 1-inch wrench and place right here, a 9/16 wrench here, and I'm going to actually screw this piece in while I'm holding this part right here, and it will finish compressing this piston all the way back into this housing. And when you start turning it, you'll feel it pushing in, and when you feel it getting snug, at that point it's all the way back. You do not have to press any further. This is what it will look like when the piston is all the way into the housing. Here we have our new disc pads, 4 of them here. There's a little backing plate that was on the inside pad on this side. You can see where the piston actually contacts this plate. I am actually going to reuse this. Some people would say you don't need to, but I'm going to put it back on the back of this pad right here before putting it back on the vehicle. Also, before I put these pads on the vehicle, I'm going to spray the back side of the pad with some disc brake quiet. This stuff is, it doesn't get really hard when it dries. It stays kind of tacky. And what it does help to do is reduce the amount of squeal that you might have with a vibrating brake pad. And I've just always done this to any brakes that I've ever done in the past. And this does help reduce the risk of getting that squeal, because nobody likes to hear that. One thing that I do want to note is you only want to spray the back side of these pads. Do not spray on this side where it contacts the rotor, just the back side of the pad. And it doesn't have to be really thick or anything, but just shake the can good and then give them a good spray on the back. Let them dry for a few minutes till they become tacky. And then at that point, I'm going to put this back on this pad right here, and I'm probably going to spray this area right here at the same time. Here I have the brand new inside pad. You can see the little red tinge it has. That's from the disc brake quiet. It's actually dried, it's a little tacky. You just slip it into these little slots in here. Sometimes you have to work with it a little bit to actually get them in, and when it gets in there, that's the way it's going to look sitting on the bracket assembly. Here I have the new outside pad. I'm going to slip it in here the same as I did on the other side. Push it in with your finger, and there are your pads sitting correctly on the bracket. Next, I'm going to pick up my caliper assembly, and I'm going to do this one-handed. I'm going to bring it in here and slip it onto the bracket. And these bolts, these are actually push in with your finger, and you just slide them in. I know this video is a little choppy because I'm doing this one-handed. And there is your caliper assembly sitting on the bracket. Next thing, your bolt here and your bolt down here. Need to put those in, get them tightened up, and you will have completed the brake job on one side of the vehicle. One thing I do want to mention is I did nothing with the rotor itself. This particular vehicle, the rotor is not causing any kind of vibration during braking, or there's no grooves cut in it from worn out pads. And you can usually tell if the rotor is worn down by rubbing your finger on the top, come from the inside out. You can feel a little ridge. You'll feel a little ridge there, but if it's very deep at all, you might want to measure your rotors and make sure that they are above the minimum thickness. If you do have brakes that are worn all the way down to the metal on the backing plate, you will have grooves cut in this thing sometimes. So at that point, you would either need to have the rotors turned or replaced. And in order to replace them, there is a slotted screwdriver or screw right here that accepts a Phillips head screwdriver. You take that screw out, and you have to take this bracket off at the same time. There's a couple of bolts on the back that hold this bracket, and then this rotor will slide right off of this axle assembly. And that's all you have to do to replace the rotor. After replacing the disc pads on the other side, you just walk around to the side that you haven't worked on. You do the same thing over here that you did on the other side. And also, after you complete the brake job itself, you want to go into the vehicle, sit down in the driver's seat, and slowly pump the brakes several times until you start to feel the pedal firm up. The first few times that you pump it, the pedal will be really spongy, and that's because the piston, which is down in here, has to come out of the housing and to push the disc pads themselves against the rotor. If you don't do that before you crank the vehicle up and go to drive off, you could run the risk of not having any brakes for a few seconds, and you risk running into something or damaging the vehicle itself. So just make sure that you do pump your brakes up before you drive off after the brake job. And this completes the front disc brakes on the 2015 Hyundai Santa Fe. Thanks for watching.